your eyes held a message tender, saying I surrender all my love to you. Midnight brought us sweet romance. I know all my whole life through I'll be remembering you, whatever else I do. Midnight, where the stars and you.
Hello and welcome once again to the Dr. Zeero Xiron free magic secrets show, where today we're going to be talking about the tarot. And I just wanted to give some tips and tricks and talk about tarot because there's never been quite a definitive tarot episode on this here program. I mean, I've done a lot of episodes about tarot, but nothing that like condenses a bunch of knowledge and just directly talks about some of the tools of the trade and whatnot. So, if this is all kind of new to you, which I doubt it is, but some helpful things to know about tarot is that if you're hearing this for the first time, if you're not, then sorry, just bear with me a little bit. But so the tarot cards originated in the 1400s in Italy. And there were two main kinds. There's one, I believe it's called the Visconti Sforza type. And then there's also known as like the Charles IV deck or the Florentine deck. So basically like in Milan is where the Sforza cards were made. And then supposedly in Florence, Italy, the cards were made. And there is supposedly like an order from Charles IV, where in 1392 they had put in an order for these hand-colored cards. And now all these tarot decks, so the Charles IV, anyway, the point is the Charles IV deck might be the original deck. And this one was supposedly made by a Jewish goldsmith from Venice, Italy. So, when we talk about Kabbalistic imagery appearing in these cards, even if it isn't like super heavy and direct, the influence seems to be there. And a lot of it could be coming from this Jewish goldsmith or other, Jewish goldsmiths who participated in making these cards. Now I think the Visconti Sforza deck it's called. Those ones are the classical imagery of the 22 trumps are pretty much coming from all those. And then the Florentine decks, there was never like a deck that really got put out until somewhat recent history. I think maybe 10 years ago or something. It's called Golden Tarot of the Renaissance. It's got like gold foil on it. It's a very beautiful deck. It's one of my favorite decks of all time. I never seen anybody carrying it anywhere. So understand that, like, okay, the reason that tarot came into being is in the 1300s and before that, the royal courts were teaching the children of the royal families. They were educating them using like educational flashcards. And originally they were like big, oversized cards, but they didn't have magical legends attached to them. They were, like, here's this planet, here's a picture of like this bishop, this is what a bishop is, here's like different figures in society that they would have to rule as a royal person. And they were kind of teaching them in this way. At some point, someone made a large deck of cards, which were used for a game called Taroki. And the actual rules of this game and how it was actually played have been lost to history. And so basically these royal courts created these cards and they were playing games with each other. And then however it happened, the people working for the courts, the underlings, they started to kind of like replicate them themselves and just kind of like make versions of them or copies of them, however it went. So like the really expensive gold-plated ones would be with the royal families, and then the underlings of their societies, they kind of caught on this way, right? And this game kind of existed for a while, and then after such a degree of time, the game was forgotten, the records were lost, and the tarot cards just ended up kind of hanging in there, but they were used for gambling after that. So people were basically like playing poker with them. I'm not sure how they would do that, but there's all kinds of ways. If you can gamble on something, they're going to figure out a way to make it happen. So understand that's what they were mainly used for. And after so many, like hundreds of years of being lost to obscurity and they're just kind of hanging in there, they had kind of a mysterious vibe to them. And if you did not know, there was a guy named Atelier, and I believe he put out a book about doing fortune telling using these cards. He was the first person. This was like 1799 or something like that. So he was the first one, but he wasn't talking about Kabbalah or about magic per se. He was just fortune reader guy, right? So he's like late 1700s. So he was the first one that picked up this stuff. So in the early 1800s, there was a writer who put out like a Encyclopedia Britannica sort of book line, which is just about history and various things that happened. It was like a big compilation of events and things. And then for some reason, he stuck in this like historical work, this complete fabrication about how the tarot cards were directly coming from ancient Egypt and that they represent ancient Egyptian lessons. And this, like, people took him dead serious, and then all this, like, these occult groups started, like, following this, and there was a fake book attributed to Iamblichus called An Egyptian Initiation, and I do believe it talked about tarot cards, but I'm not completely sure, but there was a tarot deck later on called the Egyptian Tarot based on this stuff. So there's all this, like, this myth that tarot cards came from ancient Egypt, which started to make them more interested in the developing, like, occult scene, which was very, minor in the 1800s. What had happened was this guy named Eliphas Levi showed up, and he's a super famous now French magician guy, ceremonial magician guy. He studied to be a Catholic priest, almost became a Catholic priest. He had issues because he was teaching things that weren't exactly doctrine, and he was also not really into being celibate, and so he couldn't really take the oath of the priest and what have you. So he put out a book called Transcendental Magic in 1854, also called The Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, where he had 22 chapters, and each one was devoted to a Hebrew letter, and he was asserting that the 22 trumps were flashcards for all the different Hebrew letters. And his assortment anyway, he started that whole idea. Like the ground became fertile from him, and it was a very successful book. He became very famous. So this is where the tarot cards get brought up into the occult. So as the years go by, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn starts in the 1880s. And they're continuing onward with his work, and they pioneer forth. And then I believe it's 1888, there's a book called Book T that's created by Mathers, McGregor Mathers from the Golden Dawn. He was one of the main dudes. And he put together with other people a book called Book T, which is like the blueprint schematic behind tarot, where tarot is wed to the tree of life. It's totally like Kabbalistic, and all of that is tied together. Also with astrology and a bunch of Hermetic philosophy and all this. So that right there, Book T, became the solid foundation that everyone studied if they were into like underground occult groups. But these were like secret societies that you had to join, and they had lodges and all this stuff. So there was, of course, no internet. No one was publishing their stuff. It was all secretive, and you had to get in those channels. So two of the people involved with the Golden Dawn were A.E. Waite, who wrote a ton of books, and Pamela Coleman Smith. And they teamed up together, and they said, we're going to do a tarot deck that the entire deck is going to have occult scenes in it, or things that reference this Book T. Basically, it was a Book T inspired translation, and trying to put all those ideas into the cards themselves. So it was very pointed. So this, of course, became the Rider-Waite deck. It came out in 1909, and it's been the standard of tarot ever since. It's been like the deck. And I still feel like it's the deck. For me personally, it's the best one because it's such a universal deck. So the thing to know about that specifically is while Waite had all the trumps figured out, and he was very, very direct on what he wanted, he gave Pamela Coleman Smith complete leverage, said, you do whatever you want with the minor cards, because that's it. It's just, it has to somehow tie into the lessons of the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, you know? So she did her own version, trying to explain different elements, I guess, of what the Sephiroth would kind of mean in the message, and how it could relate in an interesting, abstract way. Now, Pamela Coleman Smith eventually, I believe, turned Catholic at the end, and then she was like highly involved in religion for the rest of her life. But she was a young girl, and her nickname was Pixie. And you look at pictures of her, and not that, I guess it isn't okay, because she looks, like she's, probably today's, if I took one look at her in 2025, I said this, she's, probably a lesbian. And, when they write about her life, it kind of sounds like maybe that was going on, but we don't really know for sure. But it kind of has that air to it. And, there's kind of a, if you really look at the minor cards and all the things that are going on, and all the characters in the Rider-Waite, I don't know. I feel like there's like a queer bent to it a little bit, you could say. And a lot of the figures are totally like androgynous and ambiguous. You can't really tell if it's male or female, or if it's, one would say a more masculine looking female, or a real femininely looking male figure. It's kind of like does that on purpose. So, that's that. So if you don't know what I'm talking about with Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and all this, like the tree is not Kabbalah itself. Kabbalah is the whole body of teachings. It stands for 3 Jewish letters, QBL, and it means like to know or to receive. It's basically like when the universe just taps you on the shoulder and it's like, here, here's this like view now. It's basically when like they say the hand of God comes down and taps you on the shoulder and just alerts you to something. It's you receive something from the universe, right? And it's a whole body of teaching. And the tree of life is just one of these. And so you have this tree, and there are 10 bubbles on it. And those are called the Sephiroth. And they're the emanations of creation. They're like energy power centers. It's like a map. It's a lot of things. But the reason you could say it's most interesting is it basically represents a map of the human soul. It represents a map of the powers of the universe and the creation, you know. And it also shows the map of the individual internally. It's like 2 different power systems, you know. And it's like basically like if you really learn the tree, basically like it runs like it's like a battery, like a self-generating battery of sorts. So it's very, very important. So with the tree, it's like there are 4 trees stacked on top of each other, and they're called the 4 worlds, right? And the first, like, if you look at those bubbles, if you pulled one out, it'd be like a filing cabinet, and there'd be 4 compartments in the filing cabinet. And the first layer would be like the physical realm. The second layer would be the angelic realm. The third layer is the archangelic realm. And the fourth layer is like God's pure channel, right? So the first level is coins, and then cups, and then swords, and then finally the wands. So you have to really understand the system, and to understand the different levels and their magnification and what they mean, there's a book by William G. Gray called The Ladder of Lights, and he just spends time on the Sephiroth completely. So if you want to learn that, which is very important to this sort of way of doing tarot, if you want to learn like the old school magician way, when you hear about all this ceremonial magic, you hear about Aleister Crowley, all these people, this is what they're, basing their stuff on. And again, the main body of work that you kind of want to read, if you want to really study the Tree of Life, there's a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, Yetzirah by Arya Kaplan. It's called Sefer Yetzirah in Theory and Practice, I believe it's called. And then that will teach you. And then also the main body of work that construct the tree and really put it all together in a larger frame, like the whole schematic and map of it. This was, it's in the Zohar. And the Zohar was a luminous work of, I believe it was Spanish Kabbalists. It was a Spanish guy. I think his name was something, I forget. But the Zohar, it became a major thing in Judaism. So, to understand tarot as it's used by ceremonial magicians, you have to have like an inkling of what the Zohar is about, and also the Sefer Yetzirah. Those are 2 foundational texts. Okay. So you have the bubble, the Sephiroth, the spheres, on the Tree of Life. And if you notice, there's all these connecting lines. The connecting lines are called the paths. And there are 22 connecting paths, and each of them are what the tarot trumps represent. So each tarot trump describes the flow of force between very distinct forms of energy or compartments of our inner makeup that are very defined. So it's a tough one to learn. There's another one called Hermetic Kabbalah, Qabalah. It's a book. It's not the greatest, and it's kind of confusing and sloppy, but it will give you a lot of insight into what the paths mean. And I think the guy's name was Paul Clark that wrote it. So that's all very important. You need to know that whole background. So when you do someone's tarot in this way, you're basing it on the tree of life and whatnot. Now, the other way to do tarot what's most important about tarot? Okay, so we're gonna veer off into other subjects here. So the thing with tarot is that you want your intuition to guide you, right? Intuition is key to being a tarot reader. I mean, you can have all of the background occult information as a solid reference guide, and you can do it by the book, as they say. But you also have to let your own intuition, and sometimes your intuition kind of might break a little bit from the confines of what an image or power system might exactly mean, and it might mean something else. The thing with tarot is like always, you need the client to like be there interacting with you, because the whole point is that like the Rider-Waite's, I'll just say Rider-Waite's. Okay, so the Rider-Waite and all tarot decks really, what you're doing is like showing someone a Rorschach test basically, and it's like depending what they see and what's going on in the card and like the motivations of the people in the card and like what they're doing, what they're up to, what their quests are, what their emotions or hopes. You see it all bounce back in them. They bounce their own psychology off these like vague scenes, sort of like the tarot trumps especially. They're kind of like Rorschach tests, but they're like fixed Rorschach tests. Because a Rorschach test, you're going to have infinite amount of possibilities. Tarot cards, you're going to have like way less. You're not going to have infinity, right? You're going to have all kinds of combinations of things that could be going on in the cards that you'll see. But it's sort of like a fixed Rorschach test where like you can dig your hands into it and like figure it out. So understand the importance of the card isn't always what the card is. It's what the person is projecting onto the card. That's what you want to be messing with and paying attention to. Now, another major thing to understand is that the sacred geometry and number magic take precedence in a tarot reading as well. Now, when you talk about the 1 through 10 of the suits, right, those reflect the bubbles on the tree of life. Now, since they're numbered 1 through 10, number 1 through 10 reappears like as kind of an afterthought, as a background thing to consider. Like one of the 2 would be like the yin yang or dual opposites. 3 would be the pyramid. The 4th would be the cube, or the first standing structure, or the first foundational structure. And then the 5th would be like the pentagram. The 6th is the Star of David, and then on and on and on and on. Now, while those are like an important thing to consider when reading the 1 through 10s of any suit as kind of an afterthought, that number magic is absolutely essential to the tarot trumps, right? That's where that shines. So you really have to understand like number expansion and what all that means. The number like from 0 to 21. And because that's the thing, that's another confusing thing with the cards, because there's a 0 and it goes to 21. There's 22 cards because 20, but there's 22 Hebrew letters. So you assign the first Jewish letter or Hebrew letter. The first Hebrew letter gets assigned to the 0, and then the second Hebrew letter gets assigned to the first tarot trump. So you always have to like move it back just a little, right? And that's the difference between like I said, Eliphas Levi was talking about. His sequence starts 1, and then he puts the 0 at 21 for some reason, and then concludes with 22, which is confusing. But anyway, point is, I know this all sound off. So another thing to understand, talking about the tarot trumps, when it comes to the sacred numbers and all that stuff, the next important point is that we use like planetary powers and astrological horoscope signs, zodiac signs, and philosophical elements as kind of like a code word to determine the overall, like what the trump means is like an ensemble. So the Golden Dawn and the system that everybody's been using forever, what it is they say it's... Sorry, Dr. Zero's thinking here real quick. It's 3 philosophical elements, the Jewish philosophical elements, right? Earth isn't one of them. Earth pops up as the 10th Sephiroth on the tree, but Earth is not represented in the tarot trumps itself. What it is, it's the philosophical element of water, philosophical element of fire, and philosophical element of air. Those are the only 3. All right, so it's that. 7 planets, the 7 classical planets. The sun switched for the Earth, though. And then you have the zodiacal signs. And that gives us 22 in number.
Yeah, which place do you think you left that at?
So that's a very important thing to note and a very important thing to think of. So hold on, I'm going to pause in 1 second and think of more stuff to say. So just to be clear, I'm telling you all this stuff because I want you to be better at tarot, and if someone had just told me all this directly at the beginning of my journey when trying to learn all this stuff, it would have saved me so much hassle, and I'd be able to cut through all the jibber jabber. So, like I said, most important books to just jump on right now. The Ladder of Lights by William G. Gray is going to tell you everything about the Sephiroth, and the book Hermetic Kabbalah by Paul Clark West, maybe. That's going to do a pretty decent job at telling you what the different paths mean. Sometimes his explanations are real vague, and like I said, it's really sloppily put together book. And then, of course, study the Sefer Yetzirah by Arya Kaplan, his version of the whole thing, right? And you want to really pick up the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie, which has all of their entire system all presented there. And the thing with Regardie's book, it's it gives you all the makings. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It's just here's all the stuff, figure it out. So that one's just going to you need book T in your hand. Of course, you could Google book T 1888 PDF, and you're going to find it in 2 seconds, and it's free. So if you're listening to this right now and you've never read book T, you need to just hit pause, go to Google, and search book T 1888 free PDF and get that immediately. Stop listening to me and just go get it right now. Now, another one that was extremely helpful in helping me learn all this stuff, there's a book called The Witch's Kabbalah by Ellen Cannon Reed, I think it is. And it's a witchy, pulled back, more anarchist, more free-range, basic blueprint of the Kabbalah for witches. And that's spelled Qabala, avoiding the H at the end. If there's an H at the end, it's a Hermetic thing. If it's just Kabbalah without the H, it's a witchy thing, because Ellen Cannon Reed started it. And it was also known as The Goddess and the Tree. That was the alternative title of that book. That's when it was out in the 70s, I think. So the next thing to know about tarot, I guess there's 2 more main avenues I want to touch. I've talked about this on the show a gazillion times, but there's a book called The Sacred Tarot by C.C. Zane. And he's got a deck of cards that he put out called the Egyptian Tarot Deck. And it's known as the Brotherhood of Light Egyptian Tarot Deck. And Brotherhood of Light puts out all his books. The guy died in the 50s. So this dude came out of the Hermetic Order of Luxor, and he learned all their stuff. And the way that he was taught tarot is this ultra advanced system. And this system basically, it has all the same makings that Book T will give you, except his version isn't based on the Kabbalah. It's based on Hermetic magic and the supposed lessons about that come from the Egyptian mystery schools about the progression of the human soul, the development of the individual. And it talks about what his system, instead of being based on the Tree of Life and the Sephiroth, the suit cards are all astrological, and they pinpoint very specific astrological influences under all kinds of conditions. And he's a mathematician of astrology. He's a scientist of it. I don't even know how to explain this stuff. I get lost in it. So basically the deal is he has this book called The Sacred Tarot. It's nearly 400 pages long. Without it, those cards aren't going to make any sense, and it'll just seem like crap. There's no point. So it's one of the best books on Magic I ever read, and basically you need to. I'm sorry. You have to read the book very carefully from start to finish. It is not a book that you can skip around, because in the middle, like, he'll place information in all kinds of places in the book on purpose, so that unless you read the fine print, you'll never figure out how the system works, because he's someone that was very guarded about magic power slipping into the wrong hands. Like, you have to pay very close attention to every line as it progresses. It's like trying to learn math. You can't skip anything. And I'm telling you, if you get this book, if you go to the Brotherhood of Light website, you can order a hardcover copy of it for like $25 or something. I know I'm just one random dude on the internet, but I'm telling you, take that money and get that frickin' book. It's all totally worth it. So worth it. So that's Egyptian tarot, and it's its own inclusive tarot. It absorbs the lessons of the Kabbalah, and it kind of touches on the Kabbalah and all that shit, but it's based on what is called the grand pentagram of the universe. And like I said, astrological forces and a lot of ancient magic stuff. So that's its own system, right? So you got either the system of Book T, and then you got the system of C.C. Zane, but then you have straight up just raw, intuitive tarot reading. And that's where you just kind of go in blind. And like I said, this is where the Marseille Tarot comes in. Because the Marseille Tarot is what influenced Eliphas Levi to write his book about, how the 22 letters were the trumps. And those were all the imagery that he grew up with. Now, also, and to tie into that, there's a director, Alejandro Jodorowsky. He made Holy Mountain and Santa Sangre and El Topo, which are all great movies. And he's been messing with tarot cards forever, and he's kind of like a magician guy. I think he's in his 80s now. He's an Argentinian guy. And he wrote a book on tarot, and I believe it's called The Way of Tarot. And what he does is he throws out all that occult stuff. He completely sets it back to let's just pretend the Golden Dawn never existed. There was no C.C. Zane, none of this stuff. He's just going back here's the cards on their own terms. Here's what the Marseille Tarot deck is all about. Here's all of its secrets. Here's how you can piece it together and make mandalas with it. Here's how it all, and he researched and actually found at least what he could consider to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, Marseille deck, which had different colorations than were used later in time. And he made a reproduced deck of that you can order and get. But you gotta order it from Argentina. So there's it's extra post, and it's I don't know, on eBay I think it's almost $50 for a set of cards, and they're really cool, but that's a luxury item. But so his book is absolutely essential, because he's just here's what the imagery actually is. Let's just take it on its own terms and avoid all the hustle bustle. So what else did I want to tell you about tarot today? I think I need to just pause it and ruminate on that and see what's up. Hold on, guys. Well, considering that I've had you now for over a half hour, I think you've listened to all you need to listen to. There is, of course, an endless amount of stuff that also can be said about the tarot. But all that right there is, like I said, if I was brand new to this and I wanted to just cut through everything and get right to the point, I wish that I would have found this video right now and all the things I just said. So, even if this video reaches 20 people, I don't know if you probably know a lot of this stuff already. If anything I talked about isn't relevant to you or you don't really know about, please investigate it, because, everybody's life is richer when you enrich your own life with tarot, and you're able to move forward. And I also wanted to mention, also understand that the magicians of old, they used to say that each tarot card and what it represents, you're supposed to spend a good month to 3 months meditating upon it, figuring it out, living it, trying to absorb all the lessons, understanding that compartment of the tree of life, and like what that all means. So keep that in mind. Like as far as like the tarot trumps go, there's so much. Like each card is a universe unto itself. So it's important to really like get in there and really, study these sort of things. So that much said, that's it for the Dr. Zeero Xiron Free Magic Secret Show today. Stay tuned for more episodes and whatnot. Blah, 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 kitty smackety. And as always, here's your hot rockin' outro. Later, kids.